Time for an NOQ Report news update. NOQ Report news update on now with John Henry Westen, who's the co-founder and editor-in-chief of LifeSite News. We have a lot to discuss today. John is right now in Canada, Ontario, I take it, right, John?
That's right.
Great. Okay. His background, in case you don't know, is that he's, like I said, he's co-founder and editor of LifeSiteNews.com. Check out LifeSiteNews.com, folks. It's a fantastic website for pro-life issues and a lot of important cultural issues. He and his wife, Diane, and their 8 children live in the Ottawa Valley in Ontario, Canada. He earned his master's degree from the University of Toronto in child clinical psychology and an honors BA from York University in psychology. Again, folks, his website is www.lifesitenews.com. Check it out. Become a supporter. It's fantastic. They are in the thick of it. They are on the front lines of the fight for human life in North America. Welcome to NOQ Report News Update, John Henry. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me on. God bless you.
God bless you. I want to talk about first what's going on in Canada. It's really disturbing. This is now national news in the United States. What is going on with the churches being burned down? Who's doing it? Where's it taking place? And why?
So this is an unbelievable repeat of what happened first in the United States with Black Lives Matter. It is really unreal. We watched the US burning, the whole wide world watched as it went on, and you saw something really bizarre. You saw politicians in the US supporting it. You saw the US media saying, oh, it's not really that bad, when it was completely insane. News reporters saying mostly peaceful, and behind them is a fire burning down buildings. And one interesting thing happened in the United States, and that was that Black people in those areas that were being burned, they came out for the media that would actually cover them, and they were crying, saying, you've burned down our local stores. Where are we supposed to go? We don't have the money to take a taxi to go into town. These were our local places you're burning down. And we have that exact same insanity happening in Canada. So this is about, by the way, a government policy that was horrible back at the turn of the century. Everybody acknowledges it was horrible. The plan was to take the first native peoples, now we call them First Nations peoples, and take them away from their families and put them in schools so they could be acculturated or whatever. The point was they stripped these children from their families. Absolutely atrocious. Nonetheless, that was the government policy, not the church policy.
Right.
And yet, what has happened here is to focus attention on the church, the Catholic Church specifically, when by the way, the residential schools happened in public schools, Anglican schools, Protestant schools, and Catholic schools. So this was a government-oriented problem that all schools participated in because they had to. This was what the government dictated. Now, they found through imaging that there were 215 bodies in a graveyard. It's unmarked, or it doesn't look like a proper graveyard. So what's going on? And so immediately the voices said there's abuse, and everybody knows there's a horrifically scandalous sexual abuse problem that went on in the churches, and in all churches, by the way, not only the Catholic Church, but it's scandalous that it happened in the Catholic Church, and I'm a Catholic, and so I think that's the worst of all anyway. But let me tell you this, this grave thing, the stories that went out immediately, oh, they probably, kidnapped them and buried them all alive. Insanity, total insanity. There was no proof, no nothing about it. Yes, abuses happened at residential schools. What was this? We didn't know. These were Catholic schools that had obviously taken burial of, and they looked like little kids. So what was all that? So the rumors went nuts. The church painted as a pedophile institution, painted as now harming these little kids. What are we to make of it? And things went absolutely crazy. No voices of sanity could be listened to. People were scared. The bishops scandalously didn't speak up. the prime minister called on Prime Minister Trudeau. Anyway, I could say lots about him, but I won't. He scandalously called on the Pope to apologize. Wait a minute. Aren't you to apologize first, since this was a government policy, by the way? Nonetheless, this insanity goes on, and the mainstream media is refusing to cover the truth. That's why we at LifeSite News have at least published a true narrative of what's going on, what has happened, what is known about the situation. What is known about the situation is that there were huge tuberculosis problems at the time. And there was actually a medical report published at the turn of the century about the problems going on in residential schools that the government was running, with the problem of tuberculosis, and then the problem of need for funding, because the government wasn't doing its due diligence taking care of the schools so that they had proper medical help for residential school students, also wasn't helping them with burial costs. They weren't doing shipment of bodies. So you had this situation where, in this case, it seems like a Catholic school run by nuns buried the children, which nobody else would pay for. And since the costs of burial and of upkeep of the cemeteries wasn't kept up, they seemed to go into ill repair. And so there they are. Now, imagine that. Imagine that these were nuns caring for these poor little kids who died. No one would give them money to do it. They did it out of the goodness of their own hearts. They buried them because they couldn't send their bodies. The government wouldn't afford that. So they buried them as best they could. And now these same nuns are getting blamed for their act of charity. Now, this is all hypothetical, but it makes more sense as a hypothetical than the insanity that they're spouting. But let's
by the
go
way,
from
let me just,
hypothetical.
pardon me, John Henry, let me interject
Yeah.
something here. You may not want to say it about Prime Minister Trudeau, but I will say it. The word is thoughtless, spineless, and feckless. I'm sorry, just had to get that out.
Yeah. I can't argue with you there. But going from a hypothetical to reality, you have exactly the same thing playing out in this problem in Canada with the First Nations peoples as happened to Blacks in the United States with so-called Black Lives Matter. The people who are doing these burnings are harming the First Nations people. Don't let anybody kid you. Where were some of these churches? Some of these churches are on native lands. So whose churches are they burning? They're burning down the churches of the First Nations people. These are First Nations Catholics who want to go to church. And so who is crying now? It's the First Nations people crying. Oh yes, Catholics who are First Nations. And so this insanity is almost an exact repeat of what happened in the United States around Black Lives Matter. And in fact, now the weirdest thing, because in the United States, we saw that very strange things with politicians supporting the actions, the media covering up, politicians supporting it. You'd think that that's crazy. That how could that ever happen? How could a politician say, go out and make them pay? It was one of the famous ones in the United States. Here, we've had the same thing. You've had someone from the official, sort of official, quasi-official governmental institution call for, say, burn it all down. This was, I want to get that name
Disgusting.
right. It's Harsha Walid is her name, and she's with the BC Civil Liberties Union. That sounds insane all by itself, but that's what she said. She said, burn it all down. And this is, this is a woman, she's the executive director of the BC Civil Liberties Association, saying, burn it all down. And you might have thought, oh, that's just terrible. That's, how could you say that? Everyone's going to condemn that. Oh, no, not at all. Get this. We just reported at LifeSite News today that there's actually a lawyer defending her, saying that she'll burn it down with her, and offering to support anyone who does the burnings or represent them. So this is just so unbelievable that it beggars the imagination. It just, I don't even know what to say anymore. But that's the situation going on in Canada right now.